Before Michele Weiner Davis came along, you know, you saw her up here with me, and she doesn't look like a pioneer, I know. But she's really a very serious scholar, writer, speaker, trainer, and a pioneer. Before she came along, it was actually the cool thing to do was to be neutral about marriage and divorce. It was the way the field was. Michele and I can still remember the day, the minute, the hour that she gave her first keynote called Divorce Busting. She was on a keynote with someone doing a talk called The Good Divorce. And we knew that that person was going to get roses thrown at her, and we feared, backstage we were talking, we really thought there might be, you know, tomatoes and cantaloupes and cucumbers. We didn't know what was going to happen. From that moment on, Michele's life was never the same, and I would say mine was never the same. It was the change. She talked about unnecessary divorce in 1990. Michele changed our field.
Once upon a time, as you heard, before there was a Smart Marriages Conference, which was in 1990, we both agreed, Diane asked me to do that keynote address on the work that I've been doing with couples. And it really created quite a stir because, as Diane said, at that time it was really politically incorrect for a therapist in particular to have a stance on divorce that was anything other than neutral. But there I stood in front of 4,000 people, and I had the audacity to say that most marriages can and should be saved, and that we had had more than 20 years to look at the results of rampant divorce and disposable marriages. And as far as I was concerned, divorce often caused more problems than it created, particularly when there were children involved. And so I decided to take a stand, or maybe it's more correct to say that the stand took me. But I needed tools, because the tools that I had learned in graduate school were failing me miserably. And one of the tools I had learned, I think many of you have learned it as well, is if you just get people to open up, to share openly about their feelings, then all their problems will be resolved. In fact, my therapist mantra, no matter what people were talking about, is I'd stop them and say, but just tell me how you feel about that. So I went back to the drawing board, and as those of you who know me, you know that I studied with the late Steve DeShazer, and I learned everything I could about solution-focused therapy, and I was so passionate about what I was learning that I decided to stick around and become part of their staff, and I did research with Steve for another 3 years. And to say that I was hooked on solution-focused therapy is really an understatement. I was addicted. And then somewhere around the mid to late 80s, I had an epiphany. The solution-focused model, with its focus on goals and solutions and people's strengths, seemed like the perfect answer for couples who were teetering on the brink of divorce, couples who didn't have the luxury of time for elaborate psychoarchaeological digs into the past. I adapted the model to my work with couples, and voila, the couples in my practice were not only leaving with their marriages intact, they were falling in love again, and I was higher than a kite. That's when I wrote Divorce Busting. And it wasn't long after that that I became a full-time divorce buster, working truly with the 911 couples who had filed for divorce. They were already separated, they were unfaithful and blaming, uncommunicative, addicted, and mistrusting. But the longer I worked with these incredibly challenging couples, the more they changed their minds about divorce. I lived, breathed, and slept solution-focused techniques. I had become one with them. I could think of nothing else. I was diagnosable. Anyway, my point is I had become a believer in the power of the techniques that I was teaching. But then something happened. I began to question whether, in fact, the techniques were at the root of the positive changes in the people's lives, or could it possibly be something else? I am convinced that it is something else, and that's my divorce-busting secret number one.